Before we start the video, make sure to subscribe to our channel, The Forgotten Files. Also, drop a comment below telling us where in the world you're watching from and what time it is. Alright, let's get started. In 1847, a plantation midwife wrote a final message before her disappearance. 3 were born, but only 1 was allowed to live. And the one who lived was not the one she chose. The page was soaked in sweat, ash, and fingerprints. Small ones, infant-sized. Today, historians deny the incident ever happened. But the records kept in a locked, unlit church basement in South Carolina reveal a truth so violent, so disorienting, that the community that once lived through it refused to speak a single word after 1850. This is the buried story of a mother enslaved, a set of triplets, and the night she was forced to choose which of her own children would die and which one the overseers wanted alive. A story that did not end with that choice, because the child who survived was never seen growing, only watching. The event unfolded on the Darlow cotton estate, land so isolated that even today, its roads shift depending on who tries to map them. Built on a swamp the color of stale blood, the plantation's reputation was soaked in superstition. Slaves whispered that the soil was alive, that it remembered pain, and that seeds grown there sprouted too fast, like they were trying to escape the earth itself. The Darlow family kept meticulous records of crop yields, punishments, births, and deaths, except one year, 1847. The entire ledger is missing, torn from the binding. Only a folded note remained. A note about a woman named Marla, described as stubborn, silent, and strange with the moon. Marla was pregnant then. She was 19, and the overseer, Thomas Gray, had written a final chilling line in her file. She carries more than she appears to. For weeks before her due date, Marla refused to sleep. She kept waking with her hands bleeding, soil under her nails, as if she'd been digging in her dreams. She claimed something, or someone, was calling to her from beneath the ground. Other enslaved women warned her. Darlow children ain't always born the way God intended. But Marla kept her fears to herself. She spoke only to an elderly midwife named Ada, who swore she'd seen births on that land that split the world open. One night, Marla whispered to Ada, "I can feel 3, like 3 hearts arguing inside me." Ada believed her. The plantation doctor did not. When he examined Marla, he stepped back, pale, muttering, "No, that can't be right." He refused to explain. 2 days later, Marla went into labor while the moon hung low and rust-colored, like an open wound in the sky. Witnesses say the birth began normally, but soon the room filled with a suffocating heat, though no fire burned nearby. The midwife's candle warped, melting sideways. Baby number 1 emerged silent. Baby number 2 came moments later, gasping like it had been drowning inside her. The 3rd child did not cry. The 3rd child stared, its eyes open, already tracking movement, already focused on Marla. Ada later said the newborn stare felt older than the house. What terrified everyone more was this. One child was dark-skinned like Marla, one was brown, and one was nearly white. Under slavery, this meant only one thing. The master would claim the white-skinned child as valuable and the others as disposable. Gray, the overseer, stormed in and shouted the sentence that destroyed Marla's world. "She keeps the light one. The other 2 go back where they came from." Marla screamed, so loudly that some swore the swamp answered back with a low rumble. Gray ordered Ada to choose which child to hand over and which 2 to remove before sunrise. If Marla resisted, all 3 babies would be thrown into the swamp. Ada tried to negotiate. She tried to reason, but rules were iron on the Darlow land. Marla, shaking, clutched all 3 infants to her chest. Her mind refused to accept that choice. These were her children. Her body had grown all 3. But when she saw the pale child, she froze. Because something was wrong. Its breathing was too steady. Its gaze too fixed. It watched her, not like a baby recognizes a mother, but like a predator studies prey. The decision was made for her. Against every instinct, every scream in her blood, Marla loosened her grip on the 2 darker infants. Gray took them immediately, and Marla's soul fractured. The next morning, the plantation woke to news that Ada and another slave had taken the 2 darker babies toward the swamp, under Gray's orders, to dispose of them. But they never returned. Gray claimed the swamp, took them, as if the land itself had swallowed the infants and the women who tried to save them. Marla's mind spiraled. She refused to eat, refused to speak. She stayed in the corner of the cabin, rocking the pale child like it was a stranger she was forced to entertain. The other enslaved women stayed away. Some said the baby hummed at night, not crying, not cooing, humming like an adult breathing through its teeth. Marla tried not to look into its unblinking eyes, because if she did, she swore she saw, behind that newborn stare, something familiar, something belonging to the 2 children she lost. Within days, livestock began dying. Not slaughtered, just drained, as if something had pressed against their bodies and pulled the life out without leaving a mark. Children refused to go near Marla's cabin, saying they heard 3 voices crying inside, though only 1 baby lived there. Gray blamed Marla, calling her cursed. He threatened to punish her for witchcraft, an accusation used often on enslaved women who fought back in any quiet way. But the Darlow family had different concerns. The pale child fascinated them. They talked about training it, educating it, raising it in the house as a special case. Yet servants swore the baby didn't sleep. And when Mrs. Darlow looked into its face, she fainted, muttering about seeing 3 mouths where 1 should be. Marla stopped calling the surviving baby her child. Instead, she called it the collector. The child developed unnaturally fast. At 1 week old, it could hold its head up. At 2 weeks, it could crawl. At 3, it stood upright, silent, steady, watching everyone with a hatred too heavy for a newborn heart. Marla begged the plantation preacher to intervene, but he refused, insisting that God brings children in many forms. The slaves whispered a different explanation. The swamp had taken 2 children, but sent something back in their place. And whatever came back had anchored itself inside the pale infant. Marla noticed that the child stared longest at pregnant women, then at children, then at her, in the mirror, as if memorizing her weaknesses. In whispers, she confessed to a friend, "I think it knows the other 2 were taken. I think it blames me." Overseer Gray became fixated on the child, convinced it was a sign of his superior breeding methods, a twisted belief that enslaved women were livestock to be manipulated. He pushed Marla to hand the baby over permanently. She refused, not out of love, but out of fear of what it might do if left unchecked. One night, Gray dragged the child from her arms, but by morning he returned it. He claimed he found it standing inside his room, staring at him despite the door being locked. He said he heard babies crying from the walls, and he swore that every time he blinked, the child's face changed, briefly showing features of the 2 infants he ordered to be drowned. Gray never touched the child again. Rumors spread so far that the local church demanded an investigation. 3 white preachers visited the plantation to inspect the child. They ordered Marla to place the infant on the communion table. The moment she did, every candle in the church extinguished. The baby did not cry. It only smiled. When the candles were relit, the preachers were pale and shaking. One whispered, "That is no child." Another insisted the plantation bury it immediately. But Darlow refused, calling the pale child a gift. The church sealed the incident. The preachers returned home and resigned within the year. One died soon after, muttering in his fevered state, "3 souls in 1 body is an abomination. It watches when you sleep." Marla vanished on a moonless night, 3 weeks after the church inquiry. Her cabin was left open. The baby's cradle was overturned, and a trail of small handprints led from the cabin to the edge of the swamp, too small to belong to any walking child. Some said they heard Marla screaming from the water. Others claimed she walked into the swamp willingly, chasing the voices of her lost children. But no body was found, only her headscarf, tied around a tree like a warning. And on it, a symbol drawn in mud, a symbol resembling 3 circles merging into one. After that night, the baby stopped, behaving like a baby. It wandered the plantation freely, silent and observant, looking for someone, or something. Fear consumed the estate. Workers fled. Darlow's crops rotted, and people swore they saw children running in the corners of their vision. 3 shadows, 3 voices, 3 shapes moving as one. Slave cabins reported scratches on their doors, perfect sets of 3, always at child height. The Darlow family attempted to confine the child. Every morning, they found it outside the house, watching the fields, as if counting who remained. The swamp's shoreline changed shape. curling inward like a hand closing into a fist. And the land grew colder, even in summer. Gray finally snapped. He insisted they kill the child before the harvest. But by then, the child was no longer alone. Witnesses claimed that two more figures began appearing near the swamp. Small, childlike, but not alive. Their skin was the color of waterlogged wood. Their eyes milky. Their mouths sometimes moving though no sound came out. People swore they had seen them touch the surviving child. And when they did, it grew stronger, more aware. The three children moved in eerie synchrony, mirroring each other's steps, blinks, and turns. Not triplets anymore. A single entity with three bodies. A single hunger. A single grudge. Gray tried to deny what he saw, tried to insist these were wild children from nearby land. But everyone knew the truth. The Darlow plantation had become the meeting place of the living and the dead. And the dead were no longer powerless. By autumn, most of the enslaved population fled, choosing the risk of hunters over staying with the children that defied death. The Darlow family begged for help from the town. No one responded, because people in town had already begun hearing things. Children's laughter echoing behind them. 3 knocks on their doors at night. Infant footprints in the dust. The plantation became a vacuum of fear. Even the animals abandoned it. Darlow locked himself in the main house, praying constantly. His wife refused to speak, and Gray drank himself into delirium. Only the children remained active, wandering, pacing, watching, waiting for something, or someone. Overseer Gray finally broke. He marched to the swamp with a torch and declared he would finish what was started. He believed if he destroyed the bodies of the 2 drowned babies, the living third child would lose its supernatural power. But when he reached the swamp, he found footprints. 3 sets, leading deeper into the mud, moving like they were walking as one creature. Gray screamed curses, waded in, and never came out. Some say he drowned. Others say he was dragged under. But the truth came 3 days later when his body washed up on the bank, eyes wide open, mouth frozen in a howl, and 3 perfect infant handprints burned into his chest. The surviving Darlow family attempted to flee, but the carriage horses refused to go near the road, so they barricaded themselves in the main house. Servants heard footsteps at night, soft, fast, playful, but coming from the ceiling. Sometimes the children appeared in the hallways, sometimes in the mirrors. Always silent, always watching. Mrs. Darlow's hair turned white in a week. She kept whispering about 3 faces floating behind hers whenever she looked in glass. The children began placing objects in the house. Marla's scarf, Ada's broken necklace, a tiny wooden rattle carved by someone who never returned. They were reminders, warnings, memories brought back to punish. The plantation house burned on December 12, 1847. Some say it was accidental. Most believe it was deliberate, but 3 figures were seen leaving the burning building, small silhouettes against the flames. Not running, not afraid, just walking. The Darlow family perished inside. Their screams echoed through the trees for hours. The town recorded the incident as a tragic fire, but many refused to speak at all, because the 3 child-sized footprints found outside the ruins were still warm when touched. And surrounding those prints were dozens of others, like a gathering of children who had never been born, all watching the house burn. For 3 years, no one approached the land. Every family within 30 miles avoided the road. Pregnant women refused to walk near the river. Church bells tolled at random hours. And children reported nightmares of 3 babies with one voice. When a group of men finally attempted to reclaim the land in 1850, they found no bodies, no remains of the triplets, no trace of Marla. Only a single message carved into a tree trunk, low to the ground. We are not finished. The carving was too neat for a human hand. Too small. Too deliberate. Historians still debate what truly happened. Some claim Marla sacrificed herself to reunite her children. Some say the swamp held old indigenous spirits angered by the plantation's cruelty. Others believe the triplets were never 3 separate beings at all, but fragments of a single consciousness split into 3 bodies, unified through trauma, rage, and blood memory. But the most terrifying theory is the simplest. The land does not forget suffering, and sometimes it resurrects what was taken without returning it the way it was. The Darlow triplets became folklore, a ghost story told to frighten children. But the records are still missing, and the land still shifts. and travelers still hear crying in the trees, in perfect three-part harmony. In 1924, during a reconstruction of the old plantation road, workers reported finding 3 small graves near the swamp. 2 were empty. The third contained a child's remains, far too large to be a newborn. Next to the bones lay a fragment of cloth, Marla's headscarf. But the chilling part wasn't the bones. It was what was carved into the inside of the coffin lid. 3 circles, merging into one, the symbol of the triplets. The workers sealed the site immediately and left it unreported. But they admitted one last detail. As they covered the grave, they heard the faint sound of infants humming. Not crying, humming, coming from the earth beneath their feet. And when they turned around, they saw footprints. 3, fresh, leading into the trees. The story, they say, never ended.